had the ring, 2 months' salary tucked inside a velvet box, waiting in my nightstand drawer for the perfect moment. 3 years together, countless memories, and plans for a future that seemed so solid I could almost touch it. Her name was Lena. Beautiful, brilliant, funny. The kind of woman who made you feel like you'd won the lottery just by standing next to her. I was days away from proposing when my ex, Claire, sent me a photo that turned my world upside down. At first, I thought it was some petty jab. We hadn't spoken in over a year, and then out of nowhere, she sends me a message. Thought you should know who you're really with. Attached was the photo. Lena, in a park, kneeling down beside a small boy with sandy blonde hair. 5, maybe 6 years old. She was holding his hand like she'd done it 1,000 times before. There was no mistaking the tenderness in her eyes. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours. My logical mind tried to brush it off. Maybe it was a friend's kid. Maybe Claire was stirring up old drama. But the seed was planted, and distrust, once sown, grows like wildfire. I confronted Lena that night, holding up my phone with the image. Her eyes widened just for a fraction of a second. She recovered quickly, too quickly, smiling as she reached for the phone. "Oh, that's Alex's boy," she said, casual as you please. "My friend from yoga. She asked me to watch him while she ran to the doctor. Poor kid gets nervous around strangers." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But that seed of doubt? It was no seed anymore. It was a knot in my gut that wouldn't untangle. You see, I'm not just anyone. I'm the managing director of a top law firm in the city. Deception is a language I speak fluently. Lies and half-truths. I see them daily across conference tables and courtrooms. And that night, I saw one cross Lena's face. I didn't argue, didn't press, just smiled, nodded, and tucked the phone back into my pocket. Because while she was spinning her story, I was already spinning mine. By morning, I had a private investigator on retainer. Discreet, thorough, the best money could buy. Lena didn't suspect a thing. She kissed me goodbye like she always did, told me she couldn't wait for the weekend getaway we had planned. It didn't take long. 6 hours, maybe less, before my phone lit up with the first report. Names, addresses, marriage records. The truth laid bare. Lena, whose real name was Elena Marsek, had been married twice. Both ex-husbands affluent, successful. Both had filed for divorce citing financial misconduct, emotional manipulation, fraud. She drained their accounts, moved on, reinvented herself with a new name, a new city, a new man. Me, the boy in the photo, Nate, her son, 5 years old. And here's the kicker. She wasn't even divorced. Her second husband, Kolya, was still legally tied to her. Estranged, maybe, but not divorced. She'd kept the child and the marriage hidden, parading herself as single, free, and utterly available. I sat in my office, staring at the report, my blood turning cold. Everything I thought I knew about her, everything we built, it was a house of cards. But I didn't rage, didn't scream. I let it settle in me, this quiet, controlled fury. Because I knew one thing for certain. I was going to make her pay. And I wasn't just going to burn her world down. I was going to let her build it up first. Higher than ever. So when it came crashing down, it would take her breath away. I sat across from Lena that evening, watching her pour wine into 2 crystal glasses like nothing in the world could touch us. She was humming under her breath, some indie song that always made her sway her hips. God, she was good. Almost made me doubt myself. Almost. But the folder on my desk at the office said otherwise. Facts don't lie. Court records don't lie. The investigators had been meticulous. Marriage certificates, bank statements, aliases, even a timeline of her relocations, each one marked by a new mark. Another wealthy man she'd leached dry before moving on. I wasn't the first, but I'd be the last. So, she smiled, leaning across the table, fingertips grazing mine. You seem distracted. I smiled back, masking the storm inside. Just work. You know how it is. She nodded, playing the supportive girlfriend role to perfection. It was a scene she'd rehearsed for years. The next morning, I made my move. I reached out to both her ex-husbands. Kolya first, the current one, technically. He was guarded at first, suspicious, but once I explained, the relief in his voice was almost palpable. Turns out he'd been looking for her, not out of love, but to serve her with papers. She'd ghosted him, taken their son, changed states. Her first husband, Victor, was more bitter, seasoned by her betrayal. She'll bleed you dry, he warned. She always does. I reassured them both, told them I had a plan, and they wanted in. The foundation of my revenge was simple: patience. Let her believe the world was hers. 6 months of wedding planning, her dream wedding, no expense spared. The ring? Exactly what she'd been hinting at. Venues, florists, a couture dress that cost more than some people's cars. I let her pick it all. I even suggested upgrades, pretending to be the doting fiancé, eager to give her the world. Because the higher she climbed, the harder she'd fall. I booked the church, a grand cathedral downtown. Elegant, traditional, big enough for a spectacle. And behind the scenes, I was planning a guest list of my own. Her family, old friends, classmates, people she hadn't seen in years, people who knew parts of her past she wanted buried. I even tracked down the woman who managed the building where Lena and Kolya once lived. She had stories, too. But the crown jewels of my list, Kolya and Victor, I invited them under the guise of old friends. She didn't suspect a thing. I sold it like a surprise, telling her I wanted her to feel loved, surrounded by those who mattered. She cried when I told her. I kissed her forehead and promised her this would be the happiest day of her life. And in a way, I wasn't lying, because happiness is a fragile thing, and I was going to shatter hers into 1,000 pieces. The thing about revenge, the real kind, is that it thrives on details. And I am nothing if not detail-oriented. Every evening, I sat with Lena on the couch, scrolling through Pinterest boards, bridal magazines spread across the coffee table. She'd lean into me, her head resting on my shoulder, sighing contentedly. I can't believe how lucky I am, she whispered once, tracing the edge of my jaw with her fingertip. I smiled, kissed her hand, played my part. By day, I was the managing director of a law firm. By night, I was an architect crafting a blueprint for her downfall. I rented a private hall for the reception, an old estate with sprawling gardens, ivy-covered walls, exactly the fairy tale backdrop she imagined. She marveled at the place during our visit, her hand tightening around mine. It's perfect. I thought so too. Every deposit, every contract signed under my name, every dollar spent, tracked, documented. I kept the receipts not because I'd need them for refunds. I didn't plan on getting any. But because when this ended, I wanted to know exactly what I'd invested to build the perfect illusion. And while Lena busied herself with color schemes and seating charts, I deepened my web. The invitations went out. On her side, the usual family, a few distant friends, colleagues. Sparse. She'd told me her circle was small. I knew better now. She kept it small because too many witnesses meant too many cracks. But my side? Full. Overflowing even. More than she expected. My colleagues, my family, yes, but also her past. Names from her hometown. Faces from old jobs. People she thought she'd erased. I combed social media, alumni directories, public records. Some were hesitant, wary of the invite. I called them personally, explaining that this wasn't just a wedding. It was something else entirely. Curiosity did the rest. Kolya and Victor were the final pieces. I coached them through it. Play it cool. Smile. Be the old friends I introduced you as. They agreed. There was a quiet satisfaction in their voices. Men who'd been burned but never got their closure. This was their moment too. Meanwhile, I commissioned a video montage. Something sentimental for the reception. Childhood photos, our vacations, Lena's best moments. But tucked between the sweet clips, little flashes. A shot of her with Nate holding his hand outside a grocery store. A photo from her wedding to Kolya, blurred enough to miss if you weren't looking. Like static in the middle of a beautiful broadcast. I timed it perfectly. The crescendo of the music. The reveal. The collective gasp I imagined echoing across the hall. But that was still to come. For now, Lena was radiant. Floating on the high of anticipation. Telling anyone who'd listen how lucky she felt to have found me. I let her believe it. Because belief is the most dangerous thing to take away. And I wasn't done yet. The day before the wedding, Lena was electric. That nervous, giddy energy women get when everything feels just right. She paced the hotel suite we'd booked for her, rehearsing her vows aloud, practicing the way she'd hold her bouquet, laughing at herself for being so silly. I watched her from the doorway, leaning against the frame, smiling like I was the luckiest man alive. "You're staring," she teased, tossing a pillow at me. "Just can't believe tomorrow's the day," I said. And I meant it. Tomorrow was the day. Behind that smile, my mind was working like a machine, checking the final pieces of the plan. Invitations confirmed. The priest briefed. The ex-husbands ready. The photographer prepped. I'd even arranged for the police to be there. Quietly, discreetly. Fraud charges take time to process, sure, but with the evidence I'd gathered, her dual marriages, the financial manipulation, the different identities, the law was waiting. Tomorrow wouldn't just be a wedding. It would be an unveiling. She came over and wrapped her arms around me, resting her head on my chest. "Thank you," she whispered, "for loving me, for making me feel safe." I kissed her hair. "Always." That evening, I slipped away under the guise of finalizing some last-minute arrangements at the venue. Instead, I met with Kolya and Victor at a small cafe a few blocks from the church. Victor was nursing a whiskey, his jaw clenched tighter than the glass in his hand. "You sure about tomorrow?" he asked. "I've never been sure of anything." Kolya shifted uneasily in his seat, glancing toward the window like Lena might appear at any second. "She won't see it coming?" "She'll suspect something's off when she sees you too," I said, "but she won't connect the dots fast enough." Victor leaned back, smirking. "I want to see her face when it drops." "You will." I handed them copies of the schedule the exact moment they'd each rise, say their piece. The timing mattered. This wasn't about rage. This was about dismantling her story in front of everyone she'd ever lied to. And then the final blow. The guest of honor, Nate, her son. 5 years old, innocent in all this, but the linchpin in her web of lies. His father, Kolya, agreed. Nate would be there. He deserved to know, even at 5, who his mother really was. I drove back to the hotel that night, sat in my car for a long time, staring at the city skyline. Calm, collected. The ring was still in my pocket. Not that I'd need it tomorrow. Upstairs, Lena was asleep, sprawled across the bed in the hotel robe, the glow of her phone screen lighting her face. I watched her for a moment, wondering if she ever felt guilty for what she did. For the men she left hollow, the money she drained, the child she hid behind lies. But it didn't matter. Tomorrow, she'd face all of it. The morning broke crisp and bright, the kind of day photographers pray for. Sunlight poured through the stained glass windows of the cathedral, painting the pews with color. The venue team fussed with floral arrangements while the organist rehearsed soft melodies, the prelude to the spectacle about to unfold. Lena was getting ready in the bridal suite, oblivious to the quiet storm gathering beneath the surface. I stood at the front of the church, my tailored tux fitting like armor, my smile just loose enough to pass for excitement. But my eyes? My eyes scanned the room, marking every guest, every piece of this orchestrated downfall. Her side of the church was sparsely filled, just a few colleagues, some distant relatives. She'd told me her family wasn't close, that she preferred to keep her circle tight. A lie, like everything else. I corrected that. Behind them, seated in perfect rows, were faces from her past, names she hadn't spoken in years, people she thought she'd left behind. I'd made sure they were all there. Some curious, some skeptical, but all invited under the guise of a surprise reunion. My side? Packed. Coworkers, friends, family. All oblivious to the true nature of this gathering except for a few. Kolya sat near the back, his son Nate perched beside him, fidgeting with his little bow tie. Victor, arms crossed, leaned back in his seat, his eyes never leaving the altar. The air was thick with expectation. The wedding planner approached, whispering that Lena was ready. Showtime. The processional began. The organ swelled as the flower girls floated down the aisle, scattering rose petals like breadcrumbs. Then came Nate, tiny hands gripping his basket of petals, his eyes wide but determined. He didn't understand the weight of the day, the role he played. But he'd remember this someday. Then the music shifted. The doors opened. Lena appeared. She glided down the aisle, radiant in that $12,000 designer dress she'd spent months obsessing over. Layers of silk and lace draped her like a queen, every step deliberate, rehearsed. Her smile stretched wide, but there was a flicker in her eyes, confusion. The faces in the pews weren't quite what she expected. Familiar. Too familiar. She caught sight of Kolya, then Victor. Her steps faltered. But she kept moving. I met her at the altar, took her hand. It trembled. Her smile wavered. "You look beautiful," I whispered. Who invited?" I squeezed her hand gently, silencing her. I wanted today to be special. The priest welcomed everyone, launching into the ceremony. The words drifted past me, noise beneath the pulse pounding in my ears. My eyes never left hers. I watched the cracks begin to form, the falter in her breathing, the way her eyes darted to the faces in the crowd. She was unraveling. And the best was yet to come. The priest's voice droned on, sacred words hanging heavy in the cathedral's air. Lena's grip tightened around my hand, fingertips ice cold, knuckles pale beneath her polished nails. Her eyes flicked from Kolya to Victor and back to me, searching for an anchor, but finding none. She knew something was off. But she didn't know how far down she'd fall. "I have a surprise," I interrupted softly, my voice carrying over the pews. The priest stopped mid-sentence, eyebrows raised. Lena's head snapped toward me. "What?" I smiled. "A special guest." The doors creaked open again. Kolya rose, slow and deliberate, lifting Nate into his arms. The boy clutched a small plush bear wearing a navy blazer 2 sizes too big. Kolya walked the length of the aisle, his steps echoing in the silent cathedral. Every eye followed him. Lena's face drained of color. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath. Kolya reached the front and stopped beside me. I turned to the congregation, my voice calm but loud enough to carry. "Everyone, meet Kolya, an old friend of mine." There was a murmur, polite applause. Lena swayed slightly, her body stiff, eyes darting wildly. Kolya set Nate down gently, whispering something in his ear. The boy smiled, looked straight at Lena. "Mommy." Nate squealed, running to her, arms wide. The sound hit like a thunderclap. Lena froze. Her hands stayed at her sides, stiff as marble, while Nate clung to her leg, beaming up at her. "Mommy, why are you dressed like a princess?" Gasps rippled through the guests, her coworkers exchanging puzzled glances. The whispers began. I leaned closer, just enough for her to hear. "I believe you've met your son." Her eyes snapped to mine, wide, pleading. "You don't understand, Victor stood now, voice hard. "No, they don't understand. But they will." He stepped into the aisle, facing the congregation. "I was her first husband," he announced, his voice booming off the cathedral walls. "She left me bankrupt. Took everything I had and disappeared." Kolya spoke next. "I'm her second husband. She never filed for divorce. She ran away with my son, changed her name. Told everyone she was single." The room erupted, chairs scraping, guests standing, cameras raised. Lena spun, frantic, searching for an escape. I raised a hand, quieting the room. There's more, I said, my voice steady. This isn't just about betrayal. This is about fraud. Two uniformed officers stepped through the cathedral doors, their badges gleaming beneath the stained glass. They moved calmly, deliberately toward the altar. Ms. Marsek, one officer announced, reading from a folded sheet, "You're under arrest for fraud, identity theft, and financial misconduct across multiple jurisdictions." Lena staggered back, her mouth open but no sound escaping. The officers closed in. In that perfect $12,000 dress, standing before the altar she'd dreamed of, Lena's world collapsed. And the best part? The cameras were still rolling. The cathedral, moments before filled with reverent silence, now buzzed with chaos. Guests stood, some filming, others whispering furiously. The sound of Nate's voice calling, "Mommy," still echoed off the walls like an accusation. Lena stood paralyzed, her chest heaving beneath the intricate lace of her gown. She turned to me, eyes wide, desperate. "You don't understand, this isn't what you think." I stepped back, out of reach, my smile thin. "Oh, I understand perfectly." The officers flanked her, one gently but firmly taking her arm. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us." Her mask cracked. "This is a mistake. Kolya, tell them." She reached for him, but he stepped away, shielding Nate behind him. Victor crossed his arms, watching coldly, satisfaction in his gaze. Her desperation turned to rage. "You can't do this to me. I'm the victim here." The officer read from the warrant, listing counts of fraud, multiple aliases, the pending charges in 2 other states. Words like malicious intent, identity theft, and conspiracy to defraud filled the air, weaving around Lena like chains. Her knees buckled. She dropped into the pew behind her, burying her face in her hands. The gown pulled around her like a broken curtain. But there was no sympathy left in the room. I turned to the guests, my voice calm, resonant. "For those of you who are confused, I'll clarify. The woman you know as Lena isn't who she says she is. She spent her life conning men, marrying them, draining them, running." I paused, letting the truth settle. She told me she wanted to build a life with me. But she already had a husband. A child. Secrets. Murmurs rose louder now, shock, anger, realization. Some guests began filing out quietly, uncomfortable with the truth. The photographer captured every moment, Lena, handcuffed, her mascara smudged, her once perfect smile gone. She looked up, her voice breaking, barely audible. "Please, don't do this." I tilted my head, studying her. "You already did." The officers guided her to her feet. She tried to smooth her dress as if dignity could still be salvaged, but the grandeur of the cathedral turned her humiliation into theater. She stumbled as they led her down the aisle, the same aisle she'd dreamed of walking toward a future she'd never earned. Nate watched, confusion shadowing his face. "Daddy, why are they taking Mommy?" Kolya crouched, wrapping an arm around him. "Mommy made some mistakes, bud. She has to make them right." I stood at the altar, watching Lena's retreating figure. The stained glass cast fractured colors across the scene, like the shards of a life shattered in full view. As the doors shut behind her, sealing her fate, I turned to the remaining guests. "Thank you for coming," I said, my tone dry, final. "The wedding is canceled." The aftermath felt surreal, like standing on the edge of a battlefield when the dust begins to settle. The guests filed out slowly, whispering, casting glances at me like I was a ghost. Some offered awkward nods of sympathy, others avoided eye contact altogether. Victor was the first to approach, his lips curling into a smirk. "I gotta hand it to you, that was brutal." He clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Wish I'd had the guts to do something like this." Kolya stayed back, Nate leaning into his side, the boy's small hand clutching the hem of his father's jacket. His eyes, wide and searching, held questions he didn't yet know how to ask. "I'll cover the counseling," I offered quietly, my eyes on Nate. Kolya blinked, surprised. "You don't have to, eh?" "I know I don't. But I want to. Because even after all this, the kid was the one innocent in the wreckage." Days later, the charges stuck. Fraud. Identity theft. Conspiracy. The investigators dug into her past, old bank accounts, shell corporations, the paper trail of aliases. Turns out she wasn't just a con artist, she was seasoned. The DA moved quickly, adding in the testimonies from Victor and Kolya, the signed affidavits, the photographs, the video montage. The video from the reception? It made it into evidence. Those small, scattered flashes of her hidden life tucked between the sweet clips of vacations and birthdays. It had the jury on edge before Lena ever walked into the courtroom. I sat through every day of the trial. Lena, stripped of the glamour she once wore like armor, now faced the world in muted blouses and hand-me-down slacks from the detention center. Her hair pulled back, her face pale under harsh fluorescent lights. She didn't look at me, not once. But I watched her. I wanted to see the moment it sank in that she'd lost. That there was no sweet talking, no batting eyelashes, no soft lies that could undo the damage. The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty. The judge, a seasoned woman who'd clearly seen her share of manipulators, didn't mince words. You have demonstrated a pattern of calculated deception, exploiting those closest to you for personal gain. Her voice cut like steel. This court sentences you to 5 years probation with an initial 12-month term of restricted freedom and restitution of the defrauded funds. A collective exhale filled the courtroom. I wasn't expecting a long prison term. These cases rarely ended that way. But the restitution? That was the dagger. Every dollar she'd swindled, court ordered back to her victims. Kolya secured full custody of Nate. The court saw through Lena's hollow pleas for shared parenting. Her record spoke louder than her words. I left the courthouse that day standing taller than I had in months. Not because I'd ruined her, but because I'd reclaimed something. Justice. Closure. My own damn peace. 3 weeks after the sentencing, the letter arrived. Plain white envelope. No return address. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar, tight, careful script like someone trying too hard to make it neat. I knew who it was from before I even opened it. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 2 days, unopened, the weight of it there every time I walked past. Like a rock in my shoe. Finally, on the 3rd morning, I slid my thumb under the flap and unfolded the single sheet inside. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted to explain. Of course she did. The letter went on, line after line of hollow justifications. How she'd always struggled, how money was safety to her. How each man she met seemed like an answer to a problem she didn't know how to fix. How the lies had started small and then spiraled into something she couldn't control. I loved you in my own way, she wrote. Her own way. That phrase landed like a slap. She talked about Nate, how she missed him, how she knew she wasn't the mother he deserved. She even thanked me for giving him back to his father where he's safe. It was strange, the emotions that stirred. Anger wasn't one of them. Not even pity. Just tiredness. Like reading the final page of a book I'd never really wanted to start. I folded the letter back up and dropped it into the fireplace. Watched the flames curl the edges. The words blacken and crumble. The past needed to burn. A month later, I sat down with Kolya over coffee, catching up. Nate was doing well, he said. Adjusting, asking fewer questions. They'd started therapy. He was showing Kolya how to tie his shoes now, proud of the loops he could make. I slid an envelope across the table. What's this? Kolya asked. The first installment. From the restitution. He hesitated, frowning. I told you, you didn't have to. I want to. I leaned back, watching as he opened the envelope, saw the check. Enough to cover Nate's schooling for the next few years. I figure he deserves a head start, I said. Kolya's eyes softened. He nodded slowly. No more words between us. Just the quiet understanding of 2 men who'd both been burned by the same fire. Life moved on as it does. The wedding venue refunded nothing. Not that I expected them to. The dress, the flowers, the deposits, they stayed gone. But every dollar spent had been worth it. Not just for the spectacle, but for the closure. The law firm thrived. I buried myself in work for a while, letting the rhythm of cases and clients steady me. But there was a lightness now. The absence of weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. Lena was out of my life. And more importantly, so was the lie of her. 6 months passed. The city felt different now. Lighter somehow. Or maybe I'd changed. Shed the skin of a man who once believed love was simple, that trust was enough. I'd heard Lena moved in with her sister after the sentencing. Probation, community service, weekly check-ins with her case officer. She'd fade from public view, rebuild quietly if she could. But her name, her real name, was tarnished. No aliases left to hide behind. And me? I'd rebuilt in my own way. Sold the apartment we'd shared. Too many ghosts in the corners. Too much memory soaked into the walls. I bought a place just outside the city, nothing flashy. Brick and timber. A small garden. Enough space to breathe. I took up boxing again. Something about hitting a bag, feeling the sting in my knuckles, reminded me that I was still here, still solid. Victor emailed once. Just a simple line. Glad someone finally got her. He'd remarried, had a kid on the way. A full circle I didn't need, but was happy to hear about. Kolya sent photos sometimes. Nate's 6th birthday, all gap-toothed grin and frosting on his cheeks. Watching that boy grow from afar felt like the smallest right thing in a world that had tilted wrong for too long. I kept one thing from the wedding. The guest book. Pages filled with well wishes. Dreams scrawled in hopeful ink. Some lines now felt like mockery, but some I couldn't let go of. My mother's neat handwriting. Proud of the man you've become. My brother's crude joke about finally settling down. Those words were still mine, unspoiled. One evening, I sat on the back porch, whiskey in hand, the city lights a distant hum. The wedding video sat on my laptop, untouched since that day. I opened it, hovered over the play button, then shut it down again. Some things didn't need revisiting. I'd had my revenge, and it had been enough. But revenge, I learned, is only half the story. The other half is what you do with the space it leaves behind. So I filled it. I mentored a young associate at the firm, helped him rise faster than I ever had. I planted tomatoes in the garden, though I barely ate them. I took a trip to the coast, let the wind rip through me on some cliffside trail where no one knew my name. Life went on. And one quiet morning, sipping coffee on that same porch, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Lena. Not at myself. She taught me something in her own twisted way. About patience. About resilience. About knowing when to let go. The past was behind me now. And in front of me, whatever the hell I wanted.